I sacrificed my children's love to keep them safe. But their mother's deathbed confession finally set things right. I, 45 never thought I'd be writing this, but recent events have forced me to share my story. For 15 years, my children believed I abandoned them and their mother during the hardest time of our lives. They saw me as a coward who ran away when things got tough. I accepted their hatred, their cold shoulders at mandatory family gatherings, and their mother's narrative about me. But last week, as their mother lay in her hospital bed, she finally told them the truth. It started back in 2009. We were living in a small town outside Chicago, where I worked as an insurance adjuster. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills and allowed my wife to stay home with our kids, who were 7 and 5 at the time. Life wasn't perfect, but we were happy. At least, that's what I thought until I started noticing strange calls on our phone bill and unexplained absences during the day. I wasn't the jealous type, but something felt off. The changes were subtle at first: new clothes, a sudden interest in fitness, and mysterious book club meetings that never seemed to have any books involved. I tried to ignore the signs, telling myself I was being paranoid. Then came the text I wasn't meant to see. I was using her phone to order takeout one evening when a message popped up: "Miss you already. Same time tomorrow." My stomach dropped, but I didn't confront her immediately. Instead, I started paying attention, really paying attention. The signs I'd been ignoring became impossible to overlook. One rainy Tuesday, I decided to leave work early. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that there had to be a reasonable explanation. I parked my car a block away from our house and waited. At 2:15 p.m., a black SUV pulled into our driveway. A man got out, used a key I didn't know existed, and walked into my home like he belonged there. I sat in my car for 3 hours, watching, waiting. When he finally left, I didn't follow him. Instead, I went to a bar and had my first drink in 5 years. That's when I received the call that would change everything. The voice on the other end belonged to a man who introduced himself as a private investigator. He said he had information about my wife that I needed to hear, but it had to be in person. I agreed to meet him the next day at a diner just outside town. What he told me over burnt coffee and stale apple pie made my stomach turn. The man I'd seen wasn't just having an affair with my wife. He was part of a sophisticated insurance fraud scheme. They were targeting wealthy clients, using inside information to stage accidents and file false claims. My position at the insurance company made me an unwitting accomplice. The PI showed me photographs, bank statements, and recorded conversations. My wife wasn't just cheating on me. She was part of a criminal enterprise that had stolen millions. And now, they were planning something bigger. Something that would have ruined not just me, but our entire family. I had two choices. I could confront her and risk everything, or I could protect my children the only way I knew how. I chose the latter. Working with the PI and federal investigators, we built a case. But before it could be completed, I had to disappear. Make it look like I'd abandoned my family. It was the only way to keep them safe while the investigation continued. The hardest part wasn't leaving. It was knowing what my children would think of me. Their mother told them I'd run off with another woman, that I'd emptied our bank accounts and disappeared. It wasn't true, but I couldn't defend myself. Not then. The investigation was too important, and their safety meant everything to me. For 15 years, I lived in another state under a different name. I sent child support through my lawyer, attended the mandatory family events with a fake smile, and endured the cold stares and whispered insults. My daughter refused to let me walk her down the aisle at her wedding. My son blocked my number after his high school graduation. I accepted it all because I thought I was protecting them. Last month, their mother was diagnosed with terminal cancer. The doctors gave her weeks. That's when her conscience finally got the better of her. Maybe it was the morphine, or maybe it was the weight of carrying the lie for so long, but she decided to tell them everything. I was at work when my son called, the first time he'd willingly contacted me in over a decade. His voice was shaking. "Mom wants to see you," he said. "She says she needs to tell us something important. All of us, together." I knew what this meant. After 15 years, the truth was finally coming out. The hospital room was small, made smaller by the tension filling it. My daughter stood by the window, arms crossed, refusing to look at me. My son sat in the corner, bouncing his leg nervously. Their mother lay in the bed, a shadow of the woman who had once shared my life. The machines beeped steadily, marking time as she gathered her strength. "I've been lying to you," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Your father, he didn't abandon us. I made you hate him to cover my own crimes." The words seemed to physically pain her, each one dragging out like it was being pulled from deep inside. She told them everything. About the insurance fraud scheme, about her affair with the ringleader, about how they'd used my position at the insurance company without my knowledge. She explained how federal investigators had approached me, how I'd agreed to disappear to protect them while the investigation continued. The man I was involved with, she said, he had connections. Dangerous ones. If your father had confronted me, if he'd tried to divorce me and get custody. She started coughing, and my daughter automatically reached for the water cup, her hand shaking as she helped her mother drink. They would have hurt you, I finished for her. They'd already threatened as much when they realized I was onto them. It was the first time I'd spoken since entering the room. My son's head snapped up, his eyes meeting mine for the first time in years. The investigation had taken almost 3 years to complete. By the time it was over, 11 people were arrested, including the man from the black SUV. But by then, the damage to my relationship with my children was done. They'd spent those formative years believing I was a coward who'd abandoned them. When I was finally cleared to return, to explain, they wanted nothing to do with my explanations. Why didn't you tell us after it was over? My daughter asked, her voice cracking. Why keep up the lie? I explained how their mother had begged me not to tell them. She'd claimed it would destroy them to know the truth, that it was better they hate me than know their mother was a criminal. And maybe part of me believed her. Or maybe I was just a coward after all, afraid to face the years of pain I'd caused them, even for the right reasons. The money, my son said suddenly. The child support. It was more than you'd have been required to pay. He'd always been good with numbers, like me. Of course he'd noticed. It was part of the settlement, their mother explained. He could have taken everything, sent me to prison. Instead, he made a deal. He'd keep quiet about my involvement if I went to therapy, stayed clean, and focused on raising you too. The extra money was to make sure you'd never want for anything. My daughter made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. All those times I threw it in your face that you were trying to buy our love. You didn't know, I said quietly. You weren't supposed to know. The room fell silent except for the steady beeping of machines. 15 years of anger, confusion, and pain hung in the air between us. My children were adults now, with lives and families of their own. The little boy who used to beg me to push him higher on the swings was now a certified public accountant. The little girl who once declared she'd never love anyone but daddy was a mother herself. I wanted to tell them so many times, their mother said, her voice growing weaker, especially when they got older. But I was ashamed and scared they'd hate me the way they hated you. She reached for my hand, surprising me. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry for everything. I watched as my children processed their mother's words. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the rhythmic beeping of medical equipment. My daughter was the first to move, walking slowly to the chair beside my son. She looked lost, like the little girl who used to crawl into my lap after a nightmare. All those years, she said finally, at every family gathering, every holiday, you just sat there and took it. All the snide comments, the cold shoulders, the way Grandma and Grandpa treated you. She paused, wiping her eyes. You were protecting us the whole time. My son leaned forward, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. My wedding, he said, his voice muffled. I didn't even invite you. I told everyone it was because you were a deadbeat who didn't deserve to be there. He looked up at me, his eyes red. God, Dad, I'm so sorry. I wanted to tell them it was okay, that none of it mattered now. But that would have been another lie, and we'd all had enough of those. It hurt, I admitted. Every missed birthday, every ignored phone call, every time you turned away when I tried to explain. It hurt like hell. But I'd do it all again if it meant keeping you safe. Their mother started coughing again, harder this time. My daughter rushed to adjust her pillows while my son called for a nurse. We watched helplessly as medical staff swarmed the room, checking vitals and adjusting medications. When they finally left, she looked even more fragile than before. I need you all to listen, she said, her voice barely audible. I'm not asking for forgiveness. What I did, the lies, the crimes, turning my own children against their father. I don't deserve forgiveness. But your father does. He's the one who sacrificed everything to protect this family. My son stood up abruptly and walked to the window. I have a daughter now, he said, still facing outside. She's 2. I've been so angry for so long that I never even told you about her. He turned back to me, tears streaming down his face. Her name is Hope. Would you like to meet her? Before I could answer, my daughter pulled out her phone. Her hands were shaking as she pulled up a photo. This is Michael, she said, showing me a picture of a little boy around 4. Your grandson. He asks about you sometimes, when he sees the old family photos. She choked back a sob. I've been telling him you're a bad person, that he's better off not knowing you. I'm so sorry, Dad. I took the phone, staring at the smiling face of the grandson I'd never met. He had his mother's eyes, my eyes. I'd love to meet them both, I managed to say around the lump in my throat. We can never get back the time we lost, their mother said softly. But maybe you can build something new, something better, something based on truth this time. That was 3 weeks ago. Their mother passed away 2 days later, taking her guilt and regrets with her. We held a small, private funeral. My children stood beside me as we laid her to rest, united as a family for the first time in 15 years. Yesterday, I met my grandchildren. Hope immediately demanded to be picked up, completely unaware of the tears in her father's eyes as she called me Grandpa for the first time. Michael was more hesitant, but by the end of the day, he was showing me his collection of dinosaur toys and asking if I knew any good stories. I do know stories. 15 years worth of them, stored up like water behind a dam. Stories about their parents when they were young, about the family they never knew they had, about a love that was strong enough to endure years of hatred to keep them safe. The truth didn't magically fix everything. We're all still processing, still healing. My children and I have started therapy together, working through years of pain and misunderstanding. There are moments of awkwardness, times when old habits of distrust surface. But we're trying. Every day we're trying. Sometimes the right thing feels like the wrong thing. Sometimes being a coward and being a hero look exactly the same. And sometimes, it takes 15 years and a deathbed confession for the truth to finally set things right.